Hey all, Matt Stockton here. So the other day I met up with some old coworkers to just catch up with them, tell them what I'm up to now, hear how things are going with them, and then also to just give them a brain dump on all things AI, all the things I've learned over the past year or so, giving them like the tips, tricks, tools that I find useful. And so that was really fun. And then I got home and I realized that I kind of talked their ears off. Like it was kind of a fire hose. And I thought it might be useful to just send them, just like a list of tips and tricks that we talked about in a more distilled format. So I started doing that, and then I realized, hey, like it might be actually useful to share this as a video for other people, and also walk through my process of how I'm going to build that list. Because I realized, hey, I'm actually going to use AI to build this list of tips, tricks, and tools for things that I find useful. And so this video is an attempt to do that. So hopefully you enjoy it. So my number one tip when working with these tools is to try to use your voice as input as much as possible. Instead of typing instructions on your keyboard, which has a lot of friction for what do I actually want to say, just record yourself. And even if it's rough, it's more free flowing and you can always iterate as you go. So here's an example of me doing that with ChatGPT. I'm going to come down here, just click the microphone button. I want you to give me the top three things I should know about how large language models work in technical details. For each item, I want a header and at most 3 sentences that succinctly describes the topic. This will transcribe for you, and then you can send it in as a prompt. So I do this quite a bit for my work. And what I also want to do today is use that same workflow to actually create this distilled doc that I want to send to my old colleagues. So I'm going to talk very freeform and rough about what we discussed the other day. I'm going to transcribe that, and then I'm going to use these tools to turn that transcription into a distilled document that I can send along to them. So here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to record myself talking about the key topics I discussed with my old coworkers the other day. I'm going to use a tool on my laptop called Mac Whisper, which is just a really nice tool to record and transcribe. I use it for a lot of things. And if you want to skip ahead, go ahead. I'm just going to talk freeform about those topics, but then later in the video, I'll show how I transcribe that recording and do something interesting with it. So I'm going to get started here. I'm going to click new recording and go. Okay, so yesterday I was meeting with my old colleagues and gave them a brain dump on how I'm using AI, and this recording is just me summarizing that conversation. So, one key thing I highlighted is how you can use your voice to interact with a lot of these tools. You don't need to have the friction of typing things out. So, using voice is a really nice way to just move faster and iterate. So, whether you're writing a prompt or writing a doc, just talking about that first, transcribing, and then working with the tools works really well. Some of the other ways I use voice. So I use ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, which actually talks back to you on a run. So if I'm running and I want to either learn something new, learn a new topic, or even work on a document, like if I'm putting together a proposal, just talking through ChatGPT with that, and then at the end saying something like, "Okay, take everything we talked about and put it in a summarized and structured doc in this format." I find that works really well. So that's my number one tip. The second thing that I do a lot is this concept of meta prompting. So instead of worrying about exactly what my prompt should look like, I will use these tools to help me build the prompt itself. So I will say something like, hey, I need you to build a prompt for the following thing. These are my objectives or goals for the thing, and this is how I'm thinking about it. Write me a prompt that I can use in a large language model. So that will generally give you a prompt that's really well structured, and then you can use that as your actual prompt to the models. I really like that phased approach. It seems to work better, and I do that almost every time I'm using these tools. Is this concept of meta prompting? The third kind of high level tip I have is just having clarity on your instructions and prompts. And one rule of thumb, I forget where I read it exactly, but someone said that if you read your prompt and if you think if you had the right amount of domain knowledge and infinite time that you could follow those instructions, then it's probably a good prompt. But if you're confused by it or the details aren't there or it's ambiguous, then it's probably not a good prompt and you should improve it. So these tools aren't magic, right? You still need to describe what you want, and that clear thinking and clear writing is incredibly important. And spending time on there is really valuable. Uh, Adding on to this, another interesting way that I use these tools and that you can too is you can kind of do things like ask the model to say what additional information it might need to give you a better output. So if you get an output and it's not great, you could say, hey, how would you have adjusted the prompt to be better? Or what additional information would you need to make this better? And it gives you ideas on how you can tune your instruction. So that's a really nice pattern to use when using these models. Um, Switching gears a little bit, one thing that I really like to use these models, or one thing I like to use when using them is the concept of projects. So both ChatGPT and Claude Anthropic have this concept of projects where you can create a project, you can add documentation to that project. So if you have, documents that you want your prompts to reference, you can add them. You can even create a set of system instructions that curates how prompts done within that project will be treated. But I do this a lot. One example of what I use it for is when I'm building my company's website. I have a project for my company's website, which has all the microcopy, all the HTML for the website. It has my LinkedIn profile. It has some other documentation that I've created. And I use that project to make updates to my website. So the project aspect or the project organization is really great. And the documents you add to a project, those are used as context for the prompts that you put in that project. So I use that a lot. Some other things that we talked about were we looked at Google AI Studio. Google AI Studio is a really interesting tool. Uh, I I like to use it for more multimodal stuff. So it's really good at processing audio, video. It can even look at your screen and observe what you're doing and provide feedback. And that's a really neat tool to try in addition to ChatGPT and Claude. Um, I mentioned also that I use these tools a lot for self-guided learning. So they're really great at learning any topic that you want to learn about. And the nice thing is you can do it on your own terms, right? Like you can put the topic in, you can state what format you want the learning to be in, the length, the style, and you can even ask the models to quiz you, right? To give you questions to test your knowledge. So I use these tools a lot when I'm trying to learn. And just kind of tailing back to something I said earlier, I use it a lot in voice mode. So if I'm running, I'll use ChatGPT's advanced voice mode to learn a new topic. We also talked a lot about how I use these tools for coding. So as like an AI coding assistant, tools like Cursor, V0, I've been using Repo Prompt a lot to take advantage of O1 Pro. They're really, incredible tools. And it actually, it's great for beginners who are just starting, but for advanced software engineers, it's a really remarkable tool to add to your existing skill set of being able to write code. So I used Repo Prompt the other day to build a personal finance dashboard and essentially used voice mode with Repo Prompt to build the whole thing. So we talked about how I used it for writing code. Another thing I mentioned was the deep research tool from OpenAI, which I've found to be incredibly good at building detailed and thorough reports on topics. I've been using it a lot to learn about technical topics in the last couple days, and for this tool specifically, I've been relying heavily on meta prompting. So the concept of trying to build a structured prompt first in a phased approach before I put it in the deep research tool. So one thing that I've found that's worked well for me is I will, again, with my voice, describe the problem I'm trying to tackle and say, I have a very skilled research assistant that is ready to dive into this problem. I want to give them a 2-page summary doc that guides their research that isn't overly prescriptive, but is detailed enough to put them on the right track. And so I'll use that along with my problem description to build a prompt that I put into deep research. Um, I think I might have mentioned this one too. I'm not sure, but one way that I use these tools with my kids just for fun is I will take my phone and mirror it to our TV and let the kids describe a cartoon character that they want to make. So they could say something, I want a kitty unicorn with rainbow eyes and a blueberry nose, and they come up with all types of funny things, and then they get, images get built and put on the screen. So these were just some ways that I discussed with my old coworkers about how I'm using these tools, and that's it. So I will do that, transcribe, what something, right? I do that a lot, like for meeting summaries. Like after a meeting, I'll just go and talk about what the meeting was about, and then I'll transcribe it. And within this Mac Whisper tool, it's going to take that recording and it's going to transcribe it. So I'll let that transcribe, and then I will show you what I do next with this transcription. Okay, so now we have this transcript generated by Mac Whisper. And what I'm going to do next is try to turn this transcript into a distilled document that highlights the key aspects or topics I just talked about through that brain dump. And so, how I'm going to do this, the first thing I'm going to do is build a prompt to do so. And I'm going to use that technique we talked about earlier called meta prompting, where I'm going to use ChatGPT to build a prompt for itself, and I'm going to use my voice to do it. So, let's give it a shot. I have a transcript of me talking about different AI skills, tools, workflows, methodologies. And I just basically did a brain dump, right? I just talked through all of these different things. And what I want to do is build a 1 to 2 page document that clearly structures the different topics I talked about, has a nice header for each one, and has succinct and simple bullet points or descriptions of what my takeaways are and what I do. I also want to loop in any additional information that's relevant that I didn't talk about, but I want to lean more heavily on the information in the actual transcript. And I want you to build me a prompt that's suitable to do this, that I could send into ChatGPT along with the transcript of me talking. So that was kind of rough, but we'll see what it comes up with. All right, this is using O1, which is the reasoning model. All right, and so this is the prompt that it came up with. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to use this and see what it gives me. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take this prompt that we've generated, and then we're going to stitch it together with the transcript and run that new coalesce prompt to get it to build a document that I had just described. So let's do that. Let me copy the prompt, create a new chat window. I'm going to use O1 Pro, which is the reasoning model. It's going to take a bit of time for the response to come back, but I've generally find it works better with things like transcripts, where you really want it to look deeply in the transcript, come away with accurate information. And so you're kind of trading off time with quality. And let's copy this transcript over into this little block. And I'm using an XML block. It's usually better if you have a specific content that you're trying to get the model to look at, like a transcript or some other input. Wrapping it in an XML tag allows the model to disambiguate that information from the actual prompt. You don't have to do it, but I think it usually ends up getting you better results. So let's let this thing go. And I will put the video on pause because this might take a minute or two to come back, and then we can come back and review what it came up with. Okay, it's back. It took a little bit over 3 minutes, and this is what it came up with. So let's see. It covers leveraging voice interaction, covers meta prompting, and it's pretty succinct, right? I think I told it in the prompt to keep it short. Ensuring prompt clarity. So I had this narrative of, if you or someone you know with sufficient domain knowledge follows the instructions without confusion, it's a good prompt. That's pretty much exactly what I said in the recording. Talked about project-based organization. So all in all, this looks pretty good. So I'm going to copy and paste this, put it in a doc, and share it in the kind of blog article I put along with this video. And then one other thing to add here is, if you don't like the format of this, then you can just change the prompt, or you can kind of go back and forth and iterate with the model to ask it to change something. So for example, if this is like too succinct and I want more details, Or even if I wanted to go like pull a quote from the video, I do that a lot and say, hey, for each of these items, pull a direct quote from the transcript that you're referencing. It can do all those things. So you can think about this as just like a starting spot, right? It doesn't have to be your final product. And it's a really interesting way to use these tools, and kind of a meta demonstration too of all the things I talked about, using voice, using meta prompting. So hopefully this gave you a good picture and example. And I probably will even, once I kind of stitch together this video, I'll probably take the transcript of that video and run the same process on that transcript to give me uh, a quick description of what I was trying to do with this explanation. So you might actually see that in the post attached to this video. All right, that wraps things up. Hopefully this was useful to you and you learned a couple things about, what I do to use AI and how I find it useful, and maybe some of these things that I shared will be helpful with some of the problems you're trying to solve. If you're working on something in the space and need help, I would love to hear from you. You can check out my company's website, pragmanexus.com, or you can find other videos and articles on using these tools at my personal website, which is mattstockton.com. Hopefully, you learned something interesting, and give me a shout if you found this valuable.